I had never even heard of cloaking at that point. I didn't know it was an option. It wasn't on the list of things that can happen. Since I was a little kid, I've had an interest in Sasquatch. The first time that I heard about it was probably, I was 6, 7 years old. My folks had taken us camping up at Mount St. Helens. It's the Spirit Lake campground. And in the evening, the rangers gathered all the kids that were camping and had a big bonfire and told stories. And one of the stories that they told us about was about Ape Canyon. And I was fascinated about that. My little brother was terrified, but I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever heard about. And since then, you know, being a kid in the 70s, there wasn't a whole lot of reading material or there was no internet. The only thing you could do was watch whatever TV show, any new special that happened to come on. And those were the things you lived for. And then, you know, you get older and you move off to the woods and you start looking, but you don't really think anything is there around you because you've been raised to think that they're not real. And then one day you discover that all of the things that you've been thinking about all those years really do exist. They're really out there and they're not that far away from you. The very first time that I went up the trail that's right here by my cabin, it would have been back in early April of '92. I found a couple of broken trees beside the logging road that got my attention. The tops had been snapped out of them. And so I was curious and I stepped back into the woods a little bit to look at them a little closer, and I found a perfect footprint. And you could see where a whole story was laid out there, where they had taken a step on a higher piece of ground and their foot had slipped. Well, there was a broken stump beside it. That top of that stump got snapped off, and then they went between those two trees, reached up, snapped the tops off, and threw them on the ground. And when I read that, I read it in reverse. I found the trees on the ground, stepped back, saw the broken stump, walked over there, and then found the footprint where their foot had slid and left a perfect impression in that soft dirt. And at that point, I was thinking that this was one lone individual that was passing through to more remote places. Never would have I thought that there's a whole family that's here all the time. And, you know, that was 20 some odd years ago, 30 some odd years ago. And over the years, there were so many things that happened in the woods that I never made the connection. You know, every now and then I'd think to myself, well, I wonder if that's something a Sasquatch might do. And then I'd think, no, there couldn't be. You know, if there were Sasquatches around here, I'd know about it. You know, it's a small town. People talk. You know, you don't keep secrets. Not like that, you wouldn't think. But, yeah, so that was my very first experience. Skip ahead to, about 2006. I was right here in the yard at my cabin, and I had been out looking for a missing cat, and I didn't find my cat. But I did find a stick that had a vine wrapped around it, and I thought that was pretty cool. I should keep that stick. So I came back, and I'm standing over there by the fire pit, trimming the branches off so that I could have just the stick with the vine on it, when from the top of this tree here, a big black ball of hair just drops right out of the sky, and it hits a limb, bounces over the roof of the cabin to another tree, hits another limb, drops down a little bit, back over the roof, and hit the corner of the porch roof. And from there, I lost sight of it. From where I was standing, all I had to do was just lean back just a little bit, and I could see the ground in front of the porch, and I was expecting to see some kind of broken body laying there. And there was nothing. I ran over and looked, and my chicken was on the porch, and she was all puffed up, just frozen in shape. She didn't know what that was either. It was just a black ball of fur, no tail, no wings, no arms, no legs, just a black ball of hair. Over the years, I thought about, you know, what could that have been? And by process of elimination, I always came back to baby Sasquatch. But that just seemed ridiculous to me. I mean, you don't have baby Sasquatches in your yard. It just doesn't happen, you would think. And where was Mom, you know? And it wasn't until, let's see, it was in 2012 that I saw the Sasquatch up here on the hill following the herd of elk. And at that point, I finally accepted that it was definitely a baby Sasquatch that jumped out of the tree here in the yard. Before I realized what was really going on here, I was out one night, once probably looking for that same cat. I had gone up the trail, and I was maybe not even 50 feet up the trail, and from right here in the creek I heard an owl that growled, and you know, it was a typical hoo 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 hoo, but it was followed with a very deep growl. And I know birds well enough to know that birds can't growl, and considering I was out there in the woods by myself in the dark, it was a little unsettling. And that was one of the stranger things that happened. Things like rocks being thrown, odd structures in the woods. I would find piles of branches, and nowadays, you know, now I know enough to know that these are what are considered structures and are related to the Sasquatch, but back then I didn't have any clue. I've seen orbs in the woods, little yellow lights that just bounce around together. And, you know, back then I just kind of wrote it off as, you know, the spirits of the forest animals, you know, squirrels or something just playing together. I did not make the connection with Sasquatch. The day that the Cloaker event happened, that was during our second camp out that we put on, my friend Sandy and I. We had people that, my viewers from my YouTube channel that that had contacted us and wanted to, you know, have some experiences here. So we set up a camp about 7 miles up the highway. And on the second day, we brought the group down here to the cabin to take them up the trail and just show them some structures and where things had happened up there. So the first thing is we walk up the trail, not very far. Two of the people that were there didn't want to go off and see the structures that we were going to look at, so they stayed on the trail. My friend Sandy, she went off trail with us, but she went ahead farther back into the woods because she was going to go check her gifting area. So I believe there were 9 of us total that day. We followed an animal trail just that kind of looped back and around to where there was a tree that had been knocked down and then broken in the middle with both ends suspended. And we thought it was curious that this tree could have been broken in the middle without knocking either end of it down. So that's what we were looking at when it happened. I had my camera on my walking stick just attached to the end, and it was on just in case. I wasn't intentionally filming anything. We're just standing there discussing this broken tree, when right in front of me, about 80 feet ahead, I see this black head pop up, about so much of it, triangular shape, no neck. It just popped up and took off running, and it was all arms and legs and hair. And one of the people that was there turned and stepped right in front of me. At that point, I didn't see where it went. I kind of assumed from there it had gone across the trail. The people that had gone ahead and were sitting on the logs and the trail waiting for us, my dad's wife was one of them. She was sitting there with her little dog in her lap, and they heard the commotion, and she looked that way. She didn't see anything, but when she looked back directly across the trail from where she was sitting, she said she saw what looked like a little black monkey came head first down the tree and took off into the bushes. So at that point, we knew there were 2. Later that night, when we got back to camp, I went over my camera hoping that I had caught what I had seen. And what the camera picked up wasn't what I saw. What I saw was the black head popped up and ran. What the camera picked up looks like something from a Predator movie. And I was pretty shocked by that. We had to put it on a bigger screen to get a bigger look. And at that point, I realized, okay, this is something that my camera can't do. We went to the big screen in my dad's motorhome and got a really good look at it. And that was That was really life-altering for me, because up until that point, I didn't believe in the woo, not like I do now. You know, I had seen Sasquatch vanish into thin air, and I had rationalized it. I had seen vegetation being mowed over by something that wasn't there, and I rationalized it. And until I had the cloaker on video where I could look at it and go, I saw this, I know what this was, and this is what the camera captured. Now I believe. Now I get it. Okay, so when the cloaker event happened, and 9 of us had gone up there, I believe there were 6 of us that were standing there when it happened. Claudia was standing off to my right, and you can see in the video that she looks back in that direction a couple times. And she said later that something had caught her attention. She thought she saw fingers holding a stick, holding a branch. And but she wasn't looking when it moved. So I was the only person that saw the head come up and the individual run off. Everybody else just heard it. And then Juanita, my dad's wife, she saw the baby, but that was it. In the video, when he popped up, we were looking at this log, and I said, what the heck is that? Did you see that? And as it took off running, and everybody else was facing me, and nobody turned around quick enough to see it run off. But we did follow the tracks the next day, so we know where it went. Right about that same time, I had made a trip to the Blue Mountains, and while I was there, I experienced the woo like I hadn't quite experienced it here. Although here I had seen orbs and I saw cloaking. When I went to the Blues, that's when I saw eyes glowing, and I was sizzled a bit. You know, people talk about being zapped. I was slightly sizzled. But by the time I came back from that trip to the Blues, when you add the experiences I had there with the experiences that I've had here, it was really difficult for a very long time to go up the trail and get it through my head that these things are real, you know, because you can think about it in your head rationally and go, okay, this is what I've experienced. I now know that this happens. But when you're actually walking on the trail and trying to convince yourself that there could be an invisible being standing 6 feet from you, it's really difficult to get that mindset and think in that mindset. And I struggled with that for a long time. You know, even now, you know, when things happen, your mind wants to rationalize and go with the things that you were raised to believe are normal. And yeah, it can be really difficult to get those things out of your head. But from that point on, things really started to pick up. Our campouts that we'd have, the experiences that we'd have as a group and individually, it's like we're on part of a path, and that was just the introduction to it. You know, things have just continued to grow since then. I would say that I experience things on a regular basis. There's rarely a month that goes by that I don't have some kind of a sign that they're here, that they're around, that they're paying attention and they're listening. And, you know, I can go out and I can say something to them and I can talk to them and I'll have a response. They'll bring me a gift, or there'll be a knock or a vocal, or there'll be something to show me that, yes, they're still here and they're still paying attention. And I'm 100% sure that when these things happen, it's always deliberate. These things are always on purpose. There's very little random acts that just are coincidence. That was quite an experience over in the Blue Mountains when I got zapped. I had been part of 2 different campouts that had come together in the same place, which was miraculous that it was everybody that was there was supposed to be there for this amazing event. I had gone up for a hike on top of the mountain behind camp with part of the group, for the sunset. And the plan was when I came back down, I was going to grab my chair and go join the other group at this lower campsite where we were all going to sit in a circle facing outward and look for eye shine. So I went up to the top of the hill with the first group, and there was some sparkling in the trees that we noticed, but other than that, it was pretty quiet up there. I came back down, and by that time it was dark. I grabbed my chair and I went down to this lower campsite where we had previously said we were going to gather, and nobody was there. And I thought, well, you know, I could hear everybody else farther down the road, and I thought, well, either they're coming back here or they've been here, but I've already done the hike up the mountain and back. I've got my chair, and I'm just going to sit here by myself and see what happens. So I sat there in the darkness for maybe 5 minutes when just below me there was something large and very fast just ran through the bushes. I couldn't see anything, I could hear it. And then within 2 or 3 minutes, I noticed that my entire side, from my leg, my side, my face, my arm, everything was just tingling. And I thought, how odd is this? And so while I'm examining myself, I look up, and about 30 feet off to my left in the moonlight, or starlight, because there was no moon, there was just this massive, it was like a lump. There was no head. I'm thinking that it was somebody that was leaned over like this, because it was just this massive shoulders, maybe this big, rocking back and forth. And I sat there, and I was so new at this, I didn't even know what to do. I just kind of sat there going, well, this is a lovely spot. Gee, my camera died. Huh. Well, yep, you're still there. Huh, you know? Yep, they're all still down there, and here we sit. I was at a loss as to what to say, and after about 5 minutes, I noticed that the tingling had stopped, and I looked, and he was gone. So that's, a friend that was there with me told me that when people get zapped, what had happened to me was a sizzle. It was very mild. You know, I think there's a strong connection between the cloaking and the orbs, and, you know, there's so much going on that we're only just breaking the surface of it here. You know, all we're having is these experiences, but we don't know how it happens or how they do it, or the cause of it. You know, there's a lot of UFO reports that come with these Sasquatch experiences. A lot of the orbs that we've seen and experienced around camp, they're always associated with the Sasquatch. We had one where it was most of the group had gone out to watch the sunset while we were in the blues, and after the sun went down, they turned around and went, oh, look, there's a Sasquatch on the hill. And he walked across the hill, and then he turned around and walked back, just in case not everybody had a good look at him. And later that night, we're sitting around the fire, and there was maybe 4 or 5 of us deep in conversation, and there's a stick break, which made us pause our conversation. And then there's another stick break over here, which made us all turn and look this way. Well, when we all turned and looked this way, then we discovered there's a big orb just floating through the trees right there. And we watched him for several minutes. He kind of stopped right behind the trees. You could still tell he was there, but it was almost like he was hiding. You know, we had time to go, what's he going to do? And then he finally came out of the trees, and psh, he was gone. He just straight up where the spring was. And once again, that's deliberate. I mean, if not for the stick breaks pausing our conversation and another stick break saying turn and look this way, we wouldn't have known that it happened. And it paused long enough for everybody to watch and get a good look. So these things are all tied together. It's all part of an experience that I think we're supposed to be learning from here. You know, I don't really think about it much when I identify the orb as a he. I guess I just think of it that way because I think of it as a Sasquatch. I don't know this. I just feel that it is. I just feel that it is a Sasquatch. That it was maybe that same individual that the group watched walking across the hillside earlier that day. So I guess that's when I say he. That's why. You know, I think the young ones, do like to show off what they can do. They like to play games, and I think they like to practice on us. But I think when the big ones do things, it's part of a lesson. It's very intentional, and I think that there's things that we're supposed to walk away from with it. You know, that whenever we have an experience, it's not just that experience. There's so much more to it. When you sit back and you analyze it and think about what happened, the things that surround this experience gives you lessons, you know? It's not just that Sasquatch exists. It's that Sasquatch can do this and this and this. Oh, wait, and he can do this too. That kind of thing. You know, what I would say to other researchers who are experiencing the woo type stuff, you know, don't be afraid of it. It's meant to be learned from. It's part of nature. It's not evil. It's not, in my book, dangerous. You know, I think when people are afraid of things, it's because of how they interpret it. A lot of times people like to think of the Sasquatch as monsters. Well, they've been raised to think that they're monsters, but you know what? They're not. They're intelligent, sensitive, loving people that aren't that different from us. And when you have a woo type experience, share it. You know, that's something that was a gift, something to be appreciated, something that it shouldn't just be swept under the rug because it's part of the way things really are, you know? And if you're not ready to talk about it yet, that's fine. Just give it some time, because sooner or later, your time's going to come when that information is going to be really meaningful to you and to other people, and your day will come to talk about it. Don't hide from it. It's a beautiful gift. When it comes to mind speak, I have had some experiences. I wouldn't say that I have conversations or anything with them, but I've had, for instance, one time I was up the trail and I had been having these experiences, and I asked, you know, can't I just know your name? It would be wonderful to have somebody to refer to other than just Mama Sasquatch or the big one or the little one. Just show me your name. And the next morning I woke up and I was very confused when I woke up. I had a sense that something had gone out the window, and a vision in my mind of a black or a green background with white block letters, KOW-ME. And I heard a voice say, Comey. And when I woke up, I was so confused. All I could think was, me? Me? Are you talking about me? What is me? Well, from that, I just got up and started my day. And several hours later, it was the afternoon, I had finished what I was doing for the day and was going to go for a walk up the trail. I probably wasn't even 100 feet up the trail, and it was like somebody just slapped me alongside the head, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's a name, Comey. That was the name. Well, now I finally understood, and I don't know that that was mind speak the way some people would think about it, but it was something that was put into my mind in a dream. And I spoke with Arla about that not long afterwards, and she told me that they don't really care what you call them, but when they give you a name, they want you to pronounce it properly. And that's why I was given a visual so that I would remember it and know how to say it, and I was given the verbal, the audible, I could hear it, Comey, so I would always know how to pronounce it. Back in 2012, it was November 1st, I decided I was going to take a walk up the mountain behind the cabin here. One of the locals, old retired timber faller, had told me that back in the 70s, the Sasquatch were throwing logging equipment down into the canyon where this creek comes from. And I hadn't been up there in years, and I thought, you know, I want to go up there and get a look at that. So it was my day off, and late afternoon, my dog and I set off up the hill here, and we got almost up to the top. I got to a spot where the view opened up, and there was a nice solid stump right there beside the trail. And I thought, well, you know, I'm going to sit here and take a little break and take in the view. And while I was sitting there, I started hearing the most bizarre talking, and it was coming from just below me in the trees. And I sat and listened to it for several minutes. Of course, you know, I had an iPod in my pocket, but it was one of those things that I had heard that the Sasquatch could talk, but I didn't really believe it because I still thought they were just another form of wildlife. So I was thinking, you know, hunters maybe were down there. It got louder and more strange, and I thought maybe German hunters. And then as it got louder and more weird, I'm thinking of every mutant horror movie I've ever seen. And here I'm sitting up there on the side of the mountain by myself, and I didn't know what it was. It was just the most bizarre thing I'd heard. And so I pulled my knocking sticks out of my backpack and went whack, and it went totally silent. Okay, well, at least whoever's down there now knows somebody's up here. So I figured, okay, let's finish this hike. So put the sticks back in, I stood up, and from right behind me, the bushes were so thick. I mean, I couldn't see a foot into them. There was a grunt, a very loud and clear grunt. And my first thought was, okay, there's a bear here. Well, we need to get moving. So we continued on up, and it was only maybe another 10 minutes up to the top of the mountain. And I got up there and I looked down into the canyon where the creek flows from, and I got my sticks out and I did some knocks and absolutely nothing. And I was disappointed because I wasn't having any Sasquatch experience up there. And so I decided it was getting late and I needed to head back down. So we start coming back down, and there's a spot where the trail crosses the logging road. And the logging road goes down like this, makes a switchback, and the trail is just this very short stretch between the switchback. Well, down through there in that switchback, I hear this very human-like whistle right beside me on the trail. And at this part of the hill, it's been selectively logged, so it's pretty open. You can see quite a distance, and there's nobody there. And just below me, at the bottom of the trail on the logging road, there's another whistle, and there's nobody there. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's the elk. Elk can whistle. I've never heard them whistle like that, but must be elk. So we got down to the lower section of the road, and from there the trail was really rutted, so I was going to take the logging road back down the rest of the way. So my dog Gabby, she's ahead of me. We're walking on the road. We go around a bend, and she stops and looks back at me, and it's like, okay, there's elk. I take a few more steps. Sure enough, there they are. There's elk in the road. Okay, so that must be what all this is. It's just the elk. So we go down around the next switchback, and I look up on the hill, and there's the whole herd there. And it's like, oh, that's cool. There's the herd. And I walked maybe another 50 feet, and I hear this crashing behind me. Well, here comes that whole herd of elk down off the hill. They go behind me, and now they're running along the road on this side. And it's like, well, there goes the elk. And then I focus in on a gorilla. We don't have gorillas. Oh my God, it's Bigfoot. And it's following right along in the path the elk were. When I first spotted it, it was facing me. And it's like as soon as I realized what it was is when it turned, and I could see this huge cone. It had this pasty pale skin, black hair that had a little bit of a wave to it. It would have been beautiful with a good brushing. The face was gnarly looking. It had a huge jaw, very deep set eyes. This brow ridge was just very, very pronounced. And then it had like these two bony ridges that went up either side of the head, and it was almost like concave in between. Where we have a forehead and eyebrows, you know, there was like nothing there. It was just like this gap between these ridges. And when it went sideways, it was those ridges that formed that cone. So he was visible, she, whatever it was visible from about here up behind the last leaves of the vine maples that were there. It was November 1st. There weren't a lot of leaves left, but some. And it only needed to take a few more steps, and it was going to come out from behind that tree, and I'd get a full view of it. Well, it took those steps, and then it was like it stepped behind an invisible curtain. It just wasn't there anymore. And I stood there and I stared at that spot for 10 minutes before I finally looked away, and I looked down at my dog, and she's standing there staring at the exact same spot too. So it's like, okay, you saw this. Where did it go? Well, I had never even heard of cloaking at that point. I didn't know it was an option. It wasn't on the list of things that can happen. So I went back up to that spot for probably 2 or 3 weeks, every chance I had, and I looked at it from every angle, from up, down, sideways, and finally I rationalized it into, okay, it must have dropped to the ground faster than my eyes could perceive, and it crawled away behind a rise of ground. And that's how I rationalized it into something that I could talk about. Because, I mean, I was so excited I saw Sasquatch, but how do you tell somebody you saw Sasquatch and it vanished into thin air? You know, that was just too much. So, yeah, that was my first full good sighting. And at that point was when I realized that the one that jumped out of the tree was indeed a baby Sasquatch. Gabby was a really special girl, and I think that on some level she was made for this. She was destined to be my dog that was with me when we made these discoveries and had these experiences. She was very calm. When they were around, Gabby's head would go up and her head would whip around and she'd look, but she never barked, she never chased. Unless it was the little ones. After a few years, she got so that if the little ones came around, she would play chase, like, you chase me, I'll chase you, you chase me, but they didn't always chase her back, which confused her a little bit. But one of the things that she did do was when we'd be out hiking around after that experience, we'd sit down to take a break, and before that, she'd always sit on my feet and lean against my legs. After that day, she'd lean against my back. So it was like, you know, you never know where they're going to pop up. You watch that way, Mom, I'll watch this way. Okay, so I was going to tell you about the eye glow that I've seen. It's really cool. I've seen it here a few times. One time just coming over the bridge over here to the cabin, I looked over one night and they were right there in the neighbor's yard. And that time it was blue. One time out here in the creek, I could hear him out there at night. I went out and stood there on the bridge, and sure enough, there's 2 red eyes looking right back at me out of the creek. When we were having some night walks upriver here, we've had eye glow, not too close, but red, green, and white. We've had it at camp, our Greenwater camps, but the best eye glow story that I have is from my first trip to the Blues. This was also the same trip where where I got sizzled, where the fellow was rocking. My friends Beth and Robin and I were going to go for a little night walk, and we were getting ready, and they were maybe 3 feet in front of me. We're standing there talking, and right over Robin's shoulder, 2 red eyes turn on, almond-shaped, about so big, just right over her shoulder, and are looking at me. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to go look for some eye glow. And I didn't say anything at the time. We just went for our walk, and I told them about it while we were out walking. And we did see some sparkles and had some rocks thrown at us. And then a couple of nights later, exactly the same thing again. We were standing there in that same spot, getting ready to go for a night walk, and right over her shoulder, just a few feet behind her, the 2 red eyes, almond-shaped red eyes, turned on right over her shoulder, looked at me again. And then the 3rd time was we were getting ready to go, and everybody sit down there at that lower campsite and have our circle where we'd face out. And I realized my friend Sam wasn't with us when we got down there, so I went back up to camp to tell her where we were and see if she wanted to join us. Well, I got up there, and here her and Tom are having a big conversation, so okay, well, I'm going back down, and it is pitch black underneath the trees. And as I'm walking back down the road, I look over to where my tent is, which is about 30 feet away, and I see 2 tennis ball-sized red eyes about 10, 12 feet up in the air, right beside my tent. And of course, I wasn't frightened, but I was startled enough that I looked at them and went, I'm going to go sit with everybody and look for eye shine. And I kept walking, and I have always regretted that I didn't just stop and talk to him. But, yeah. I just said, I'm going to go look for eye shine, and kept walking. Well, I think the significance of the eye shine is when we see it, it's mostly for our benefit. They're just showing us that they can do it. And I don't think that the color has anything to do with their emotional state. I think that when we say that red means they're angry, I think that's us putting our human emotions, projecting it onto them. You know, I have friends who've seen their eyes go rainbow colors. You know, I've seen their eyes white with just a little bit of yellow in it. I think they can make it be whatever color they want it to be, you know? It's not necessarily because I'm a demon. They're not evil. They're just capable of some really miraculous things. So, how and why, I don't know, other than it's for our benefit when it happens. It's intentional.